Talk to us a little bit about your journey in understanding the importance of asking better questions of the Bible.
Yeah, and I can't remember how much we got into in our last previous episodes when I shared my story, but there was a time where we weren't using the term deconstruction in the same ways, but early 2000s we were talking a lot about postmodernity, and here comes a whole new wave of something, and look out. And we were using the word deconstruction to do some different things. But I was on that journey. I was a young mid-20s, early 20s year old, and I had all these questions, and none of the boxes that I was handed, none of the categories I was handed were helping me out. And I knew that everybody around me had these same questions. And we were kind of forcing all of these questions into the same categories, the same answers, the same approaches. And really what helped me was bumping into teachers that were reframing the conversation or rephrasing the questions, or they were doing something else. And I was like, this conversation is better. And I didn't know it at first, but eventually it was like, well, it's because we're asking a whole different set of questions. While I didn't know it at the time, I was just falling in love with the idea of asking questions as a whole. Like, asking questions is what gets us where we need to go. Growing up in a world that basically said, could you not ask so many questions? Could you just trust the system?
Do you still see a lot of people stepping into deconstructing? What would you say is the importance of deconstructing and reconstructing?
Yeah, and I do think, on one level, we could easily say deconstruction is just a natural part of any dynamic faith. Like, anybody's personal faith evolution, spiritual growth, spiritual formation, part of what that means is taking ideas, taking them apart, realizing where you're wrong, learning something new, putting it back together. I mean, that process in and of itself on any level is the process on a really basic level, just deconstruction. Like, there is a part of deconstruction where there is no, there's just a witnessing, an affirming that where you're at and what you're doing. Like, some people there's a lament, there's a grief to deconstruction. And if somebody's in the middle of lament or grief, you don't shortcut them. You don't try to hand them the next step. And so there's like a pastoral intuition of what this person needs right now is to just be seen. Like, somebody just needs to bear witness to where they're at and say, yeah, and that's okay. Jesus is there too. Sometimes you have this pastoral intuition, like, okay, maybe I can just ask the question of what's like in this whole process, what's the thing that you're finding that's a treasure? What's the thing that you're finding that you're holding on to? What's the thing that you're finding that actually gives you hope as everything else crumbles? Like, you're helping them try to find the good stuff. And you're not telling them what the good stuff is. You're prompting them to, in their own discovery, you're asking them, you're listening to them to discover the good stuff. Or maybe they're even further along in that process. And I think so often when we feel somebody deconstructing, like, we want to grab them and tell them what to do. We want to identify what the good pieces are. We want to tell them what to do with the good pieces. We want to tell them how fast to move and where to end up when they're all over. And really what we're just doing is being a spiritual companion. That's what we ought to do, is just bear witness, listen, help them think critically. Because if they're really chasing after Jesus, we're going to be okay. Like, Jesus has got this.